3 days, 20 experts, nearly $1 million in consulting fees, and a $200 million contract with an aerospace client was slipping through the fingers of North Bay Dynamics. On the top floor of the Seattle headquarters, a massive LED wall bled red, a storm of error charts and broken logic. Engineers sat frozen, fingers over keyboards, as if even the act of typing might shatter the fragile silence holding the room together. The air was thick and heavy, like the morning fog rolling over Elliott Bay, damp, gray, and full of quiet defeat. At the head of the long glass table stood Clara Whitmore, 42, CEO of North Bay Dynamics. Her posture was carved from steel, her charcoal gray suit immaculate, and her dark hair pinned tight like a line of control drawn across her face. 3 days, 6 emergency meetings, $500,000 in consultant fees, and what do we have? Her voice was calm, low, but it sliced through the silence like a razor through glass. No one dared answer. The only sound came from the distant hum of servers and the uneven rhythm of shallow breathing. Clara checked her watch. 5 minutes. I want a solution, not another apology. She turned and left. The door closed softly behind her. Not with anger, but with the quiet finality of a verdict. Outside the boardroom, a man in a faded gray uniform bent to pick up a soda can that had rolled from an overflowing bin. The corridor lights flickered against his face. Ethan Cole, night janitor. His uniform was worn, his shoes scuffed, one earbud dangling loosely. But his eyes weren't on the trash. They were fixed through the glass. On the whiteboard inside, a battlefield of numbers and tangled formulas. Something in those symbols didn't sit right. A misplaced variable, a rhythm out of tune. He stared for a long moment, lips pressed together. Backwards, he murmured under his breath. By 11 that night, the boardroom lights still burned. The engineers had gone home, their footsteps slow and heavy, their confidence left behind among the empty coffee cups. Ethan entered with his cleaning cart, mop in one hand, cloth in the other. The smell of markers and caffeine clung to the air. He moved quietly, wiping the table, then stopped in front of the whiteboard. Equations sprawled across it like a battlefield. He tilted his head. No, not broken, just inverted. The logic loop had been flipped. He reached for a red marker, drew a sigmoid curve, circled 2 reversed nodes, wrote in small, steady letters beneath it, "Check your loss function. It's backwards." Then he stepped back, folded his arms, and smiled faintly. "They've been looking at it from the wrong side." A voice came from behind him, calm, sharp, unmistakable. "And you think you've got it right?" Ethan turned. At the doorway stood Clara Whitmore, her silhouette framed in white light, eyes cold but curious. "I wasn't trying to interfere," he said quickly. "Just noticed something off." She said nothing, only stepped closer. Her gaze traced the red lines on the board. Without a word, she pulled a tablet from her coat, entered the adjustments exactly as he'd drawn them. 8 seconds passed. The chart flickered. Red, amber, then green. Accuracy up 18.4%. Error down 61%, she read flatly. The silence that followed was heavier than applause. Clara looked up, studying him. "Name?" "Ethan Cole." "Night shift, maintenance?" "Yes, ma'am." "Education?" "Stanford, left junior year, raising a 5-year-old daughter now." Clara's expression didn't change, but something softened behind her eyes. "You just saved a $200 million deal, Mr. Cole. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., strategy room." "Ma'am, I have to take my daughter to school." "That's not an invitation," she interrupted. "It's an instruction. Give your daughter one more reason to be proud of her father." And with that, she turned and left, her heels echoing down the hallway like punctuation marks in a sentence he would remember forever. Ethan stood there for a long time. The red ink on the board glowed faintly under the sterile light, like a wound just beginning to heal. He looked at the mop resting in the corner and let out a quiet laugh. "Guess you're getting a raise, old friend." He switched off the lights and pushed his cart down the silent corridor. Outside, Seattle rain fell like silver dust against the glass, whispering over a city that didn't yet know that somewhere inside one of its towers, a man with a rag had just rewritten its fate with 3 strokes of a red marker. The morning light in Seattle wasn't golden. It was steel. It slipped through the blinds of a small apartment on 5th Avenue, touching the edges of a worn kitchen table where Ethan Cole stood, pouring milk into a tiny bowl. Across from him, 5-year-old Mia swung her legs from a chair too tall for her hair a messy halo of brown curls. "Daddy," she said between spoonfuls of cereal, "why do you work when everyone else sleeps?" Ethan smiled faintly, though the question had always pierced him deeper than she knew. "Because buildings don't sleep, kiddo. Someone has to make sure they wake up shining." Mia frowned, unconvinced. "But you're really smart. Mom said you were going to make robots that talk like people." He paused. The spoon clinked softly against the bowl. "Yeah," he whispered. "I was supposed to." A photo hung by the fridge. A woman with gentle eyes and a smile that looked like sunlight after rain. Julia. The reason he'd once believed in miracles. The reason he'd walked away from Stanford 3 years ago, when the hospital lights turned her face pale and still. He'd traded equations for diapers. Neural networks for bedtime stories. And in the long, lonely nights of janitorial work, he found a rhythm again. Quiet, slow, human. By 8:30, Mia was chasing pigeons outside her preschool while Ethan stood by the gate, holding her backpack strap like it tethered him to a world that made sense. She turned, waved, and shouted, "Don't forget to bring my picture to work, the one with you and your lightning mop." He laughed. That picture, crayon on printer paper, was pinned inside his leather satchel. A man holding a mop in one hand and a bolt of lightning in the other. To her, it was funny. To him, it was prophecy. When he arrived at North Bay Dynamics, the sun had burned away most of the fog, but inside the building, the air felt just as heavy as the night before. He walked through the marble lobby where digital sculptures of data floated in glass tubes, numbers glowing like fireflies. Security didn't even glance at him. They never did. To them, Ethan was part of the furniture, the invisible hum that kept the machine running. But this morning, something was different. His name, E. Cole, had appeared on the internal message board. Strategy room, 8:00 a.m. Attendance required. He almost didn't believe it until he saw the mirrored doors slide open to the 21st floor. Inside, the strategy room looked nothing like the world he knew. Walls of glass, coffee cups from countries he couldn't afford to visit. A table polished so smooth it reflected the fluorescent lights like still water. Around it sat engineers, project leads, data scientists, people with degrees longer than their names. And at the head, Clara Whitmore, her posture perfect, expression unreadable. Her eyes met his. "Mr. Cole, you're on time." "I've been practicing that," he said quietly, and a few heads turned. She pointed to a chair near the end of the table. "That's your seat." He sat. Every breath in the room seemed to tighten. Clara began the meeting like a trial. "Yesterday, we faced a collapse, one that nearly cost us a $200 million contract and our reputation. But someone," she tapped her tablet, "saw what we didn't." The LED wall flickered to life. There, in red marker, appeared Ethan's corrections. The sigmoid curve, the circled nodes, The line, "Check your loss function. It's backwards." "Last night," Clara said evenly, "someone gave us a gift." Murmurs rippled through the room. Ryan Dalton, the lead systems engineer, with a Harvard degree and an ego to match, leaned back in his chair. "With all due respect," Ryan said, voice dripping with polite disbelief, "how do we know it wasn't just luck?" Clara's expression didn't change. "Run it." Ryan hesitated, then keyed in the parameters. The simulation started. 8 seconds later, the bars turned green. No lag, no overfitting. The model ran clean. Silence again, this time sharper. Ethan could have stayed quiet. But something inside him, something that had been silent for years, decided to speak. "If it was luck," he said, his tone calm, "then I hope we're smart enough to learn from luck when it walks into the room holding a mop." Laughter rippled around the table, low, cautious, but real. Even Clara's eyes flickered, the faintest suggestion of a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," she said. "That will be all for today." But as he rose, she added, "Stay after the meeting. I'd like a word." When the others left, Ethan remained. Clara stood by the window, the Seattle skyline gleaming behind her like a wall of glass and fog. "Stanford," she said without turning. "Top of your class before you left. I read your file." "That's ancient history," Ethan said. "History that just saved my company." He didn't respond. "Why janitorial work, Mr. Cole?" He shrugged. "Because it's honest. Because it lets me pick my daughter up from school. Because—" he glanced down at his hands. "Because sometimes the only way to survive a world that measures worth by job titles is to stop caring what the title says." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she picked up her coat. "Tomorrow morning, engineering review." "Be there!" "I don't belong there," he said. "Neither did the solution. And yet here we are." When Ethan stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds hung low, soft and silver. He reached into his satchel and pulled out Mia's drawing. The man with the lightning mop smiled back at him through the crayon lines. He smiled too, quietly. Because somewhere between the floors of a skyscraper, between the penthouse of power and the basement of forgotten men, a door had just opened. And this time, he wasn't afraid to walk through it. The next morning, Seattle woke to a thin mist curling over Elliott Bay, but inside the glass tower of North Bay Dynamics, the air felt electric. People whispered in corridors that usually echoed with confidence. The word janitor floated from mouth to mouth, half disbelief, half rumor. Ethan Cole walked through the lobby clutching his worn satchel like a shield. His shirt was neatly pressed, the best he owned, though a faint coffee stain still marked the hem like a reminder of who he was. The receptionist looked up, hesitated, and said softly, "Good luck." That was new. When the elevator doors slid open on the 21st floor, he stepped into a silence so sharp it almost hummed. Engineers lined the long oval table, faces pale with expectation. Coffee cups, tablets, graphs, all arranged like ammunition. And at the head, Clara Whitmore, unmoving, a figure of precise control. Her dark hair fell in clean symmetry, her eyes carrying that same surgical calm. She didn't smile, didn't frown. She observed. "Mr. Cole," she said, "take your seat." He obeyed without a word. Folding into the chair at the far end of the table, feeling every stare prickling his back. Clara touched her tablet. The wall display blinked awake, flooding the room with color. On it, A single screenshot from the previous night. 3 red strokes of marker across the whiteboard. A sigmoid curve. 2 circled nodes. 1 note written in firm handwriting. Check your loss function. It's backwards. Last night, Clara began, her voice even, we received something rare. Perspective. Someone saw what 20 of us couldn't. A ripple of murmurs. Someone shifted in their chair. Ryan Dalton, the senior systems engineer, leaned forward, his fingers laced. His watch gleamed under the light like an unspoken credential. Perspective, he said lightly. Or luck. Clara didn't blink. Run it again. Ryan smirked, but obeyed, keying the command sequence into his laptop. Numbers cascaded down the screen like rain. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then, green. All green. The model stabilized. Error rate, down 61%. Latency, reduced by 22 milliseconds. Silence spread through the room like a wave. Ryan cleared his throat. Still could be coincidence. Ethan's voice came from the end of the table. Quiet, but steady. Maybe. But if it is coincidence, I hope we're smart enough to learn from coincidence when it walks into the room holding a mop. A few people chuckled softly. Even those who didn't smile seemed to breathe easier. Clara's gaze, for just a flicker, softened, the kind of almost smile that looks accidental. Thank you, Mr. Cole, she said. That will be all. He nodded, ready to retreat into the safety of invisibility. But as he stood, her voice cut through the air again. Stay. When the others filed out, Ryan Dalton lingered a little longer, pretending to gather his notes. With all due respect, he said toward Clara, our clients pay for proven credentials, not experiments. Clara didn't look at him. They pay for results. Dismissed, Mr. Dalton. The door shut behind him, leaving only the hum of the projector. Clara turned toward Ethan. You made quite an impression. That wasn't the goal, he said. Good, she replied. That's probably why it worked. She gestured toward the screen. Tell me, how did you see it? The inversion in the loss function? He shrugged. It wasn't technical, really. I just saw a pattern that didn't breathe right. That word, breathe, lingered. Clara's eyes narrowed, curious. You talk about code as if it's alive. Maybe because it is. Every system reflects the people who built it. And sometimes, he smiled faintly, people get tired. Clara studied him quietly. You have a daughter. Mia, she's 5. She must be proud. She thinks I clean robot toilets, he said dryly. Clara almost laughed. Almost. Tomorrow, I want you to sit in on the algorithm design review. Observer status. Ethan hesitated. You're serious? I don't waste time with jokes. She picked up her coat, already walking toward the door. And Mr. Cole, she added, glancing back, next time you bring perspective into my company, make sure you bring coffee too. The engineers looked terrified. He watched her leave, half amused, half stunned. That night he found himself walking home slower than usual. The rain had stopped, and the city glowed with the silver melancholy only Seattle could conjure, part machine, part dream. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. C. Whitmore. Thank you for last night. The board doesn't know yet. Let's keep it that way. For now. He stared at the text until it blurred into the glow of the streetlight. For now. He didn't know whether to feel honored or expendable. At home, Mia was asleep, one small hand gripping the corner of her drawing, the one where he held a mop and lightning in the same hand. Ethan sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. He whispered, "They saw it, kiddo. The thing I fixed." Mia stirred, half asleep, murmuring something only a dream could understand. He looked at her, then at the city lights flickering through the rain-streaked window. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt the quiet hum of possibility, fragile, dangerous, and alive. At North Bay Dynamics, silence traveled faster than gossip. By the next morning, everyone in the building had heard some version of the story. The janitor who accidentally solved a $200 million problem. Some said it was staged. Others whispered that Clara Whitmore had lost her edge, that she'd embarrassed the company by trusting someone from maintenance. No one said it to her face, of course. But when Ethan Cole walked through the corridors that morning, the silence followed him like an invisible mist. He arrived early. Habit, not ambition. He'd learned long ago that the quiet hours before dawn were when machines, and people, revealed their real behavior. As he walked past the glass offices, he caught fragments of conversation. Lucky guess. He was probably fed the answer. "It's a PR stunt." Ethan said nothing. He simply pushed his cart to the storage room, pretending to check the supply list while his badge still marked him Maintenance, Level 1. That label used to feel neutral. Now, it burned. By 9 o'clock, the engineering review meeting began. Clara Whitmore stood at the head of the table again, flanked by department heads and senior engineers. Ryan Dalton sat to her right, jaw tight, posture perfect. Ethan took the far seat, not at the table but near it, where the assistants usually sat. He didn't belong there. He knew it. So did everyone else. Clara began, voice even and sharp. Yesterday's correction improved accuracy by 61%. Latency dropped 22 milliseconds. Our aerospace client has asked for a status update by Friday. She tapped her tablet, and Ethan's red marker adjustments appeared on the massive screen. Ryan folded his arms. "We've reviewed the patch," he said carefully. "While it works, it hasn't been tested at scale. Implementing it could expose us to system volatility." "Define volatility," Clara replied. "We're talking about an untested parameterization introduced by someone without an engineering background." He didn't look at Ethan when he said it, but the target was clear. The room went still. The air turned colder. Ethan didn't move. His hand rested on his notebook, fingers tapping softly, a quiet rhythm that steadied him. Finally, he said, "If the system runs better, the numbers speak for themselves. If it fails, I'll be the one mopping up the mess anyway. So I guess I have more skin in the game than most." A few quiet snickers broke the tension, but Ryan pressed on. "It's not about jokes. It's about credentials. We can't tell clients that their multi-million-dollar product depends on an improvisation." Clara's gaze turned to him, sharp as a blade. "Our clients don't care about credentials, Mr. Dalton. They care about stability. And right now, Mr. Cole's improvisation is the most stable part of this company." The room froze. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. When the meeting ended, Ethan stayed behind, gathering stray papers, a habit he couldn't unlearn. Clara approached quietly. "You handled that well," she said. "I wasn't trying to. Just told the truth." "That's rarer here than you think." He glanced at her, curious. "Do you always defend the people no one likes?" "Only when they're right," she replied, turning toward the window. The skyline of Seattle gleamed through the glass, steel and cloud and fragile light. "You shook a hierarchy, Mr. Cole," she said. "They'll resist that. Keep your head down for a while." "That's easy," he said. "I've been invisible for years." She smiled faintly, a real smile this time. Not anymore. That afternoon, Ethan returned to the maintenance floor. The fluorescent lights hummed and the smell of disinfectant felt oddly comforting, like coming home to the only world that didn't judge him. He filled the mop bucket, water swirling like a galaxy in miniature. "You know," he murmured, "for a bunch of people building artificial intelligence, they're terrible at recognizing the real kind." He chuckled under his breath and went back to work. But that night, as he checked his locker, he noticed something new. His schedule had been changed. A new note taped under his name: Project Observer, Core Development Team. Starting Monday. No explanation, no signature. Just 3 words scrawled at the bottom in neat handwriting. CW. At home, Mia was waiting by the window when he arrived. "You're late," she said, mock scolding. "Big people talk too much," he replied, smiling. She ran to him, holding another crayon drawing, this time a picture of him standing beside a tall woman in a gray suit. Between them, a red lightning bolt connected their hands. "Who's that?" Ethan asked. "Your boss," Mia said proudly. "You're giving her electricity." He laughed. "Or maybe she's giving it to me." As Mia giggled and climbed onto his lap, Ethan stared at the drawing, at the red bolt bridging 2 impossible worlds, and wondered for the first time if fate ever hid its invitations inside children's art. Outside, rain brushed the windows again, steady and patient, washing the city clean. Or trying to. By Friday morning, the rain had turned relentless. That soft Seattle kind that never really fell, only hung in the air like a long sigh. Inside North Bay Dynamics, the building hummed with the mechanical rhythm of 1,000 small tasks. The cafeteria smelled faintly of burnt coffee and ambition. But down the maintenance corridor, Ethan Cole sat on a crate beside his cart, holding an unsigned resignation letter. It was short, 12 words that had taken him 3 hours to write. "Thank you for the opportunity. Please transfer my position back to the night shift." He'd stared at it until the words lost meaning. The truth was simple. The higher he climbed, the lonelier the air became. He could feel the stares now, not the curious ones from before, but the sharp, silent kind that follow a trespasser in a temple. Ryan Dalton had stopped speaking to him altogether. The junior engineers whispered, then went quiet when he entered a room. Even the janitorial crew, his old brothers in invisibility, had started calling him Sir. He hated that. He wanted his peace back, the quiet rhythm of mop strokes and soft jazz in one earbud. He wanted to be no one again. But most of all, he wanted to stop feeling like he was standing in a room he wasn't invited to. When he brought the resignation letter upstairs, Clara Whitmore was standing by the window of her office, her reflection superimposed on the skyline. Without turning, she said, "You're here earlier than usual." "I'm not staying long," Ethan replied, holding the envelope out. "I think it's best for everyone." Clara turned then, slowly, her eyes scanning his face. Not angry, not surprised, just quiet. "Best for who?" "For the team. They don't want me here. You know that." "And you?" He hesitated. "I don't like being the reason people whisper." Clara crossed the room, heels clicking softly. She didn't take the envelope. "Mr. Cole, when you solved that model, did you ask anyone's permission?" "No." "When you cleaned floors, did you wait for applause?" "No." "Then why are you waiting for it now?" He exhaled, his voice low. "Because I have a 5-year-old who deserves a father that's steady, not one getting crushed between 2 worlds." Clara studied him for a long moment, then said almost gently, You told me once you wanted to give your daughter reasons to be proud. He nodded. She pointed to the envelope. That letter erases one of them. Ethan looked down at the paper. The 12 fragile words that suddenly felt like surrender. Do you have kids, Ms. Whitmore? He asked quietly. Her face flickered. Something passed through it, fast and human, before she spoke. No. My work demanded everything I could have given one. Silence filled the space between them like a tide. Maybe that's why I can see what you're about to do, she said finally. You're mistaking survival for safety. They're not the same. Ethan didn't answer. The sound of the rain against the glass filled the pause. Clara stepped closer, her tone dropping to something almost intimate. I'm not asking you to prove yourself, Ethan. You already did. I'm asking you to show your daughter that courage doesn't always wear suits or badges. Sometimes it wears calloused hands. Her words hit deeper than she could know. Ethan swallowed. You sound like someone who's lost something too. Clara looked away. We all have. The difference is whether we keep building after. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small laminated badge. White background, the North Bay logo embossed in silver. She slid it across the table toward him. Ethan Cole, Core Development, Observer. It's just a title, she said. But maybe it's time the world called you something closer to what you really are. He stared at the badge. It gleamed faintly under the office light. His name, his real name, not followed by janitorial. When he looked up, Clara's eyes were steady. Go home, she said softly. Tell your daughter her father's learning to stand a little taller. He didn't trust his voice enough to answer, so he nodded instead, slipping the badge into his pocket. That night he stopped by a small bakery near the harbor, the kind that still smelled like butter and patience. He bought a single chocolate cupcake, wrapped it carefully, and carried it home in both hands, as if it were something sacred. Mia was sitting cross-legged on the couch, coloring. What's that? She asked, eyes wide. A surprise. He unwrapped it. It's a promotion cupcake. Did you get one? Sort of, he said, handing it to her. But I think you earned it more than me. She frowned, smearing frosting on her lip. Why? Because every time I wanted to quit, I kept thinking about the girl who believes her dad can fix anything. Mia giggled. That's me. He laughed, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the badge. See this? Her eyes widened. It's shiny. It's proof, he said quietly, that sometimes people stop seeing you for what you were and start seeing you for what you do. Mia traced the letters of his name with her small finger. Does this mean you're a superhero now? Ethan smiled, tears stinging the edges of his eyes. Maybe just a janitor who stopped cleaning floors and started cleaning systems. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The city lights shimmered on wet pavement like constellations scattered at his feet. He stood by the window long after Mia fell asleep, badge still in his hand, the echo of Clara's words in his head. Give your daughter one more reason to be proud. And for the first time, Ethan Cole didn't feel like he was running from the world. He felt like he was quietly, steadily building one. The following evening, Seattle was dressed in fog. A thin, silvery mist clung to the edges of every window, softening the skyline into something almost human. Street lights shimmered like lanterns in the dark. Ethan Cole stood at the corner of Pier 49, his hands buried in his coat pockets, staring at the quiet curve of the waterfront. He wasn't sure why he'd come. Clara Whitmore had simply said, "Meet me at 7, the place by the harbor." No agenda. No agenda. He'd replayed those 2 words 100 times. In her world, everything had an agenda. Every meeting, every smile, every silence. So he came. Because maybe, for once, he wanted to see what Clara Whitmore looked like when she didn't belong to her title. The restaurant was tucked between an old bookshop and a flower stall that smelled faintly of salt and roses. Its sign read, Sento Mare, and its windows glowed with amber warmth. Inside, the light was low and gentle. Candles flickered against wood-paneled walls. Jazz played from a speaker that crackled like memory. Couples leaned close over wine glasses. Ethan spotted her immediately. Clara Whitmore, the woman who ruled boardrooms with a glance, sat by the window wearing a soft gray sweater instead of armor. Her hair, always pulled tight, fell loosely over her shoulders. No jewelry, no laptop, no clipboard. For a moment, he didn't recognize her. For a moment, he wondered if she recognized herself. She looked up and smiled. Not the kind that closed doors, but the kind that opened a quiet space between two people. "You came," she said. "You sounded like someone who doesn't hear no very often," he replied. "Occupational hazard." He took the seat across from her. A small oil lamp flickered between them, painting her face in gold and shadow. For a while, they didn't speak. The waiter brought warm bread, and the sound of the ocean pressed gently against the glass. Clara broke the silence first. "Do you know why I asked you here?" "To talk? To remember how?" That line landed heavier than she intended. She looked away, fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "For the last 3 years, my conversations have been transactions. Reports, negotiations, signatures. But this..." She gestured vaguely at the candlelight. "This feels like oxygen." Ethan studied her, noticing the small tiredness at the edges of her eyes, the kind exhaustion that no amount of power could erase. "Oxygen's underrated," he said. "People forget you can't climb without it." That made her smile. A real one, quiet and reluctant. "You always talk like a poet pretending to be an engineer." "I'm just a janitor who refuses to shut up," he said. They both laughed. For a moment, the world around them disappeared. When the laughter faded, Clara's expression changed. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You already did." "Then one more," she said, voice softer now. "Why did you really leave Stanford?" The question hung in the air. Ethan looked down at his hands. Strong, steady, but marked by years of work that didn't belong to the life he once dreamed of. "Julia, my wife," he said finally. "She got sick during my 3rd year. The kind of sickness that doesn't wait for graduations." He swallowed. "I sold my books, worked nights, tried to hold everything together. When she passed, I stopped running. I took the first job that would let me raise Mia and still hear her laugh in the mornings." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "So yeah, I clean floors, because floors don't die. They just get dirty again." Clara's eyes glistened. She didn't look away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," Ethan said gently. "We all build our lives out of what's left." For a long time, neither spoke. The city outside blurred into streaks of silver. Finally, Clara said, "You know, people think power makes you free. It doesn't. It just builds a bigger cage. The glass is cleaner, but it's still there." Ethan leaned back, nodding slowly. "Then maybe you need a janitor." She laughed again, the sound almost musical this time. "You know, that might be the best proposal I've ever received." "Technically, I didn't propose anything." "Then maybe you should." He smiled, shaking his head. "Careful, Ms. Whitmore. You might start sounding like a person." "Maybe that's the point," she said quietly. They talked for hours. Not about code, not about contracts, but about music, about childhood, about how loneliness changes shape when you stop fearing it. She told him about her mother, a pianist who believed emotion was a luxury only the rich could afford. How Clara had built her career out of precision. No mistakes, no feelings, no room for loss. And yet here you are, Ethan said, inviting a janitor to dinner. Maybe I'm testing the system, she replied. Maybe you're debugging your own life. Her laughter came softer now, like something breaking free. When they stepped outside, the fog had thickened into a pale veil. The sound of waves whispered against the pier. They walked side by side without speaking, their steps echoing in rhythm. At the corner where their paths split, Clara stopped. Tomorrow, she said, there's another meeting. Higher stakes. You'll be there. What kind of meeting? The kind that tells the world who belongs where. He nodded. And what if the world disagrees? Then, she said, eyes steady on his, we teach it to look again. For a moment, the air between them felt charged, not romantic, not professional, something rarer. The stillness that happens when two people finally see each other clearly. She turned to leave, then paused. By the way, Ethan. Yeah? Next time, don't call me Ms. Whitmore. He smiled. What should I call you then? Clara will do. She walked away into the fog, her gray sweater dissolving into the mist. Ethan stood there long after she disappeared, the sea breeze cold on his face, the faint scent of salt and bread still lingering. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a ghost haunting someone else's world. He felt seen, and strangely, that terrified him more than anything. The next morning, the fog over Seattle felt thicker, heavier, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Inside North Bay Dynamics, the elevators hummed like quiet verdicts, carrying people upward to the 22nd floor where only the chosen few were allowed to speak. That day, Ethan Cole was one of them. But he didn't feel chosen. He felt exposed. He wore the same light blue shirt as before, freshly ironed, though the fabric still bore the faint ghost of an old stain near the cuff. A reminder that no amount of effort could erase where he'd come from. In his pocket, Mia's drawing rested like armor, a man holding a mop and lightning. When the doors slid open, the boardroom stretched before him like a courtroom. A long oval table of smoked glass reflected the glow of city light. At its head sat Clara Whitmore, expression unreadable. The only calm figure in a room full of polished anxiety. Around her were the decision-makers, the ones who spoke in shares and risk, not words and breaths. To their right sat Ryan Dalton, his posture perfect, his smirk small but present. The quiet satisfaction of a man who expected the system to self-correct. Ethan took the seat Clara gestured toward, the far end. Not at the table, not away from it. A liminal place, halfway between guest and suspect. Mr. Cole, said a gray-haired man in a navy suit, voice clipped and judicial. You're here because your intervention last week altered the architecture of a core product. We're here to determine whether that deviation will be maintained. The word deviation hung like smoke. Ethan straightened, clasping his hands. It wasn't a deviation. It was a correction. Ryan Dalton's polite smile widened. A correction by someone outside the engineering team, without clearance, without credentials. Clara's eyes flicked toward him, sharp, warning, but she said nothing. The gray-haired man continued. Mr. Cole, we appreciate initiative, but this company functions on structure. Without it, we invite chaos. We can't risk a janitor tampering with a $200 million project, no matter how miraculous the outcome. The word janitor cracked through the air like a small whip. Ethan felt every pair of eyes on him, some pitying, some hostile, most indifferent. He could have stayed silent. He almost did. But then he thought of Mia, of her drawing pinned to his fridge, of the quiet courage it took to keep showing up every night with no one noticing. He stood. "You know," he began softly, "when I first took this job, I thought the world was divided. People who build and people who clean up after them. Turns out both groups make a mess. The only difference is who gets blamed for it." A ripple of uneasy laughter spread across the table, but Ethan didn't smile. "I'm not here because I hacked your system. I'm here because I saw something broken and fixed it. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Or are we only allowed to fix things if our business card says we can?" Ryan leaned forward, tone controlled. "You're oversimplifying. Systems are fragile, one wrong adjustment. And 20 experts can't see the forest for the variables," Ethan cut in, voice firm but calm. "You all treat logic like religion. I just listen to it breathe." For the first time, even the board fell silent. Clara's lips parted slightly. Not in surprise, but in something closer to pride. Ethan continued. "If I wore a $1,000 suit and quoted neural weight equations instead of cleaning schedules, you'd call this innovation. But because I wear a janitor's uniform, you call it luck. So what's really being tested here, my code or your comfort?" That landed. Even Ryan looked momentarily disarmed. Ethan glanced toward Clara, and she met his eyes for a single deliberate second. Then she turned to the board. "Enough." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. Every sound in the room, every whisper, every keyboard click, stopped. "I run this company on performance," Clara said, "not prejudice. When I reviewed Mr. Cole's changes, the numbers spoke clearly. Error down 61%. Predictive stability up 22 milliseconds, 0 regression in testing. Those results don't care what uniform he wears." She looked directly at Ryan. "If your concern is credibility, then let me offer mine. I stand by the data, and by him." Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it again. The gray-haired chairman frowned, tapping his pen. "You're setting a dangerous precedent, Ms. Whitmore." "Yes," Clara said. "The precedent that ideas are worth more than titles." The meeting adjourned in silence. People left in orderly confusion, murmuring in low voices that sounded like disbelief trying to become gossip. When the room was empty, Ethan stayed seated, eyes fixed on the city through the glass wall. Seattle stretched out below, all light and rain, every street reflecting something brighter than it was. Clara walked over, setting a folder beside him. "You handled yourself well." "I didn't handle anything," he said quietly. "You did." "I defended a result, not a person." "That's what everyone says before they mean the opposite," Ethan replied, smiling faintly. She smirked, almost despite herself. "Maybe." They stood by the window together. The fog was lifting, revealing the faint outline of Mount Rainier in the distance, that impossible shape that seemed both real and imagined. "They won't forgive this easily," Ethan said. "I know. You might have just burned your bridges." "Then I'll build better ones," she replied. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time saw the cost of her calm, the exhaustion behind the precision, the loneliness of command. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "You don't owe me anything." She took a breath, eyes still on the horizon. "Because once, someone saw me the way I saw you. Capable but out of place. And they gave me a seat at a table I wasn't invited to." She turned to him. "It changed everything." Ethan nodded slowly. "Maybe that's how change always starts. One seat at a time." "And sometimes," she said, "with someone brave enough to sit down." As they left the room, Ethan paused, glancing back at the empty table, that polished monument to hierarchy and fear. For the first time, he didn't feel small. He felt necessary. And though he couldn't yet name it, something had begun to shift, not just in North Bay dynamics, but in the quiet space between two people who had spent their lives pretending not to need anyone. Outside, the fog thinned into silver light. The city was waking up. And for the first time, Ethan Cole wasn't cleaning the system. He was rewriting it. The morning of the presentation felt like standing on the edge of a storm. The sky above Seattle was a restless gray, and the air itself carried the kind of tension that only came before either disaster or revelation. Inside North Bay Dynamics, the corridors were quieter than usual. Not out of peace, but out of fear. Today, the company would demonstrate its new predictive AI system for Aurora Technologies, a client whose single signature could secure or destroy $200 million in contracts. And somehow, impossibly, the code that carried the company's fate was written, in part, by a janitor. Ethan Cole arrived an hour early. He wanted to breathe the space before it filled with expectations. The vast conference hall on the 18th floor looked more like a stage than a room. Tall glass windows, spotless white panels, an LED wall that stretched from floor to ceiling. He took his place at the technical station near the back, headset on, laptop open. The hum of servers surrounded him like the steady heartbeat of something alive. From his pocket, he pulled Mia's drawing, now wrinkled at the edges, and placed it beside the keyboard. A man with a mop and a lightning bolt. He smiled softly. "Let's make it count, kiddo." At 9 o'clock sharp, Clara Whitmore entered. The room straightened itself at the sight of her. She wore a black suit, simple, precise, no jewelry except a slim watch. Every movement was deliberate, every word measured. "Good morning," she began, voice calm, even. "What you'll see today isn't theory, it's proof. Real-time learning at a scale we once thought impossible." Her tone was smooth as glass, but Ethan could hear the current beneath it. The same mix of confidence and defiance that had become her language lately. In the front row sat Aurora's delegation. 3 executives in navy suits, eyes sharp and waiting. And beside them, Ryan Dalton, expression unreadable, hands folded like a man ready to collect evidence. The demonstration began. Data flooded the screen, waves of simulation, variables shifting, models recalculating. The numbers gleamed green, a perfect rhythm of efficiency. The room exhaled. Then, at minute 11, something went wrong. The latency indicator on the top right corner flickered. Once, twice, then slid from green to yellow. The 3D model on the screen began to stutter, freezing for half seconds at a time. Whispers. A chair scraped. Ryan's voice, cool and precise, broke the silence. "Ms. Whitmore, we're hitting the neural lag again." Ethan's pulse kicked. He scanned the diagnostics. Buffer overload, input queue misaligned, pressure building fast. In his headset, a technician whispered, "We can restart the process. 3-minute reboot." 3 minutes. In a presentation like this, 3 minutes was the difference between a contract and a headline. Ethan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He could wait. Stay silent, stay safe, let the professionals handle it. That was what everyone expected of him. But then, in his mind, he saw Mia, sitting cross-legged on the floor, coloring his name in orange crayon. He remembered what Clara had said. "Give your daughter one more reason to be proud." He exhaled once, then moved. "No reboot," he said into the mic. "I'm adjusting live." "You can't," the technician hissed. "You'll crash the buffer." "Watch me." Ethan's hands flew across the keyboard, lines of code unfurling like instinct. He accessed the optimization module, his own patch, bypassing the default queue and rerouting the pipeline through a secondary thread. The numbers spiked, then flattened. On the main display, the yellow indicator hesitated, a trembling pulse, before sliding back to green, and then deeper green. The model resumed spinning, smoother than before. The room gasped. Quiet, collective disbelief. Clara didn't miss a beat. "As you can see," she said evenly, "our system is capable of dynamic correction under live load, self-optimization, even under stress." Her voice never trembled, not once. But Ethan could see her reflection in the glass wall behind the screen, and the faintest shadow of a smile crossing it. When the simulation ended, the Aurora delegation rose in a rare standing ovation. Their lead representative extended his hand toward Clara. "Impressive. This is why we chose North Bay Dynamics." Ryan Dalton clapped politely, the sound hollow. At the back of the room, Ethan removed his headset and leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. For a long moment, he just watched the green graphs pulse on the screen. Breathing, alive, calm. After the clients left, the conference room emptied, leaving only echoes and adrenaline. Ethan was packing up his laptop when Clara approached. She didn't speak immediately, just placed a paper coffee cup on the table beside him. "Decaf," she said. "You're shaking." He smiled faintly. "Could have been worse." "Could have been genius," she replied. He looked at her, eyebrows raised. Was that a compliment or a reprimand? "Both," she said. "You saved us again, but next time I'd appreciate a warning before you perform open-heart surgery on my servers." He laughed quietly. "You would have stopped me." "Absolutely." They stood there for a moment, neither moving, both knowing what the other wouldn't say. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "The board's already calling this a miracle. They'll spin it as a triumph of innovation. But you and I know the truth. That a janitor broke protocol? That courage doesn't need clearance." Their eyes met. In that shared quiet, something wordless passed. Respect, exhaustion, something dangerously close to kinship. That night, long after the building emptied, Ethan stood on the rooftop balcony overlooking the city. Seattle shimmered beneath him, the Bay Bridge glowing like a thread of gold through fog. Behind him, the door opened softly. "You just saved a $200 million contract," Clara said, stepping beside him. "It wasn't me. It was the whole team." "Don't be modest. I hate modesty." "Then you'll hate being right." She smiled, tired, real. "I talked to the board. You're off the janitorial roster as of tomorrow." Ethan blinked. "Wait. You're joining the core development team. Officially." "You sure? Some people won't be happy." "Some people," she said, gazing at the skyline, "still believe talent needs permission to exist. I'm done managing that kind of ignorance." She turned to him, extending her hand. "Welcome to a new chapter, Mr. Cole." He took it. The handshake was firm, professional on the surface, but beneath it, there was something else. A recognition. A promise. He looked at her and said softly, "Guess we both just rewrote the rules." "No," Clara said. "We just stopped pretending they made sense." That night, as the wind carried the faint scent of salt from the bay, Ethan thought of his daughter asleep, of the mop that had once been his only weapon, and of the boardroom where he'd finally stopped apologizing for breathing. The world hadn't changed. Not yet. But something inside him had. And for the first time, he didn't feel like he was cleaning someone else's mess. He felt like he was building something worth keeping. A week after the demo that silenced every skeptic, North Bay Dynamics felt different. Not quieter, just watchful. The air itself seemed to hold a question no one dared to voice. What happens when the system realizes it's been outsmarted by the person it ignored? Ethan Cole walked through the marble lobby in a new ID badge that caught the light when he moved. It read, Ethan Cole, Core Development Team. He hadn't gotten used to it yet. Some people nodded politely now, though most pretended not to see him. To them, he was still an anomaly, a break in the code of hierarchy. But to Clara Whitmore, he had become something else entirely. Proof. The Monday after the Aurora presentation, Clara summoned the executive board to the summit room, the topmost floor of North Bay Dynamics, where the walls were glass and the view was reserved for the powerful. The men and women who filed in had no idea they were about to watch their own structure bend. When everyone was seated, Clara stood by the window, sunlight reflecting off the bay behind her. North Bay has always prided itself on innovation, she began. But innovation doesn't come from systems that punish difference. It comes from people who see what the system refuses to. She turned, eyes scanning the room. So, starting today, I'm implementing a new internal initiative, the policy of permission. A stir of confusion spread across the table. Ryan Dalton's voice was first. Permission for what? For talent to exist where it's least expected, Clara said. From this day forward, any employee, regardless of department, title, or degree, can submit technical insights directly to R&D for review. No approvals, no gatekeepers. She paused, letting the words land. If an idea works, it lives. If it fails, we learn. Either way, merit wins over status. The silence that followed was sharp. It was Ryan again who broke it, his tone smooth and cold. With respect, that's chaos. We built this company on structure. You're proposing an open floodgate for amateurs. No, Clara replied. I'm proposing a door for the invisible. You're romanticizing luck, Ms. Whitmore. We can't afford to base multi-million projects on sentiment. Her voice hardened. Sentiment didn't save the Aurora contract. Skill did. From someone this company had labeled unqualified. Ryan's jaw flexed. You mean the janitor? I mean the engineer who happened to hold a mop, she said. You can decide which version of that truth makes you more uncomfortable. The room went utterly still. Later, when the meeting ended in tense silence, Clara found Ethan waiting outside the elevator, leaning against the wall with 2 coffees in hand. You look like someone who just declared war, he said, handing her one. You heard? Half the building's buzzing. The janitor's policy, they're calling it. She smirked, weary but amused. Of course they are. You know this is going to blow back on you, right? I'm counting on it, she said. Maybe the noise will wake them up. He studied her for a moment. You ever get tired of fighting? Every day, she said. But then I remember what happens when no one does. That afternoon, Clara's inbox overflowed. Not with congratulations, but with dissent. Executives warning her of liability. Middle managers terrified of losing control. Investors questioning her judgment. But there were other messages, too. Anonymous ones. Short, clumsy, but raw. I've had an idea for months, but was scared to share it. I thought I was the only one who didn't fit in. Thank you. She forwarded each one to Ethan with no comment. He read them late into the night, sitting at his small kitchen table while Mia slept in the next room. For the first time, he realized what they'd really built together. Not just a fix, a fracture. And through that fracture, light was pouring in. 2 days later, Clara called him to her office. When he entered, she was standing beside a glass wall covered in sticky notes, equations, ideas, names. At the top, in black marker, she'd written, "Talent without title, Phase 1. "We're starting small," she said. "Internal prototype team. You, 2 junior analysts, 1 intern from logistics. No degrees required, just ability." Ethan blinked. "You're serious? You made me serious." He smiled, shaking his head. "You're going to make enemies." "So will you," she said. "But I've learned something from you, Ethan. The people who build quietly at night don't fear the noise of the morning." He looked at her, really looked, and saw it, the spark of conviction that lived under all her restraint. It was strange. For months, he'd thought Clara Whitmore was made of marble. Now he realized she was made of glass, unbreakable only because she'd chosen to stay transparent. That evening, they stood side by side on the rooftop balcony. The bay stretched out beneath them, the water turning gold as the sun dipped behind the skyline. "You changed this place," Clara said softly. "You gave it permission to change. You know they'll come after us, right? The press, the investors, the people who live off rules." "Then we'll give them a better story," he said. She looked at him. "And what's that?" He smiled faintly. "That a janitor and a CEO once fixed a machine together. And it turned out the machine wasn't just broken. It was blind." Down below, the lights of the city flickered on, one by one. Tiny human declarations against the dark. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both understood the same truth. North Bay's real revolution hadn't been written in code. It had been written in courage. The world didn't change overnight. But something inside North Bay Dynamics and inside Ethan Cole quietly had. He still took the same elevator, still carried the same coffee mug, still greeted the same security guard on the night shift. But now, when the receptionist looked up and smiled, she said, "Good morning, Engineer Cole." The word still felt strange in his ears, like a melody he'd heard once as a child and never dared to hum again. In the weeks after the policy of permission went live, strange things began to happen inside the company. The silence that once guarded every hallway began to crack. A janitor left a note under the engineering door with a fix for a misbehaving servo system. An intern in accounting submitted a predictive model that reduced supply waste by 8%. A cafeteria worker drafted a layout that improved the flow of people during lunch hours, using geometry she'd learned from watching her son's homework. For the first time, ideas weren't traveling down. They were traveling up, and in the quiet corners of the building, you could almost feel it, a sense that something sacred was being rebuilt. That Friday evening, after most of the staff had gone, Clara Whitmore stood by her office window, watching the city dissolve into amber light. Ethan knocked softly on the glass door and stepped in. He wore his usual jacket, sleeves rolled up, an expression somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. "You wanted to see me?" "Just to say thank you," Clara said. "For what?" "For forcing me to remember why I started this job." He smiled faintly. "And here I thought you hired me to mop up your mess." "You did," she said, her tone lighter now. "Just not the kind I meant." They both laughed, but under it was something real, a warmth that had grown between two people who no longer needed to defend how they existed. Clara turned serious again. "The board approved your proposal," she said. "Which one?" "The mentorship program. For kids from underfunded schools. You called it—" "Ground floor genius," Ethan finished. "Yes, they're funding it fully." He blinked. "You're kidding." "I don't kid," she said. "Applications open next month. You'll oversee it." He leaned back against the glass wall, letting out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Julia would have liked that, he whispered. Your wife? He nodded. She used to say every locked door in this world was built by someone afraid of being small. Maybe this opens one. Clara's voice softened. Then let's make sure it stays open. That night, Ethan came home later than usual. Mia was still awake, drawing by the kitchen table under the soft yellow glow of a lamp. Crayons were scattered everywhere. Blue rivers, purple skies, red stick figures holding hands. You're supposed to be in bed, he said, smiling. I was waiting, she said. I made you something. She handed him a piece of paper, edges wrinkled, colors bright. He looked at it and went still. It was a drawing of the North Bay building, tall and glassy, but this time something was different. In every window she had drawn tiny faces, smiling, waving, colorful dots of life. And at the very top, standing on the roof, two small figures, one with a mop, one with long, dark hair. Between them, the same red lightning bolt, brighter this time, stretching from sky to ground. That's you and your friend, Mia said proudly. You fixed the tower. Ethan stared at it for a long time. His throat tightened. Yeah, he whispered. We fixed it. She climbed into his lap. Will you build another one? He smiled, kissing the top of her head. No, he said softly. I think we'll build something better. Later that night, after Mia fell asleep, he pinned the drawing beside the first one, the man with the mop and lightning bolt, on their small kitchen wall. Two drawings, side by side. Two chapters of the same story. He stood there in the dim light, realizing that somewhere between those pages he had stopped being a man who cleaned after others' mistakes, and become someone who taught the world how to see its own reflection. At that same hour, across the city, Clara sat alone in her office, the lights of Seattle shimmering below her. On her desk lay a single folded note in Ethan's handwriting. Sometimes the smallest spark doesn't just light a room, it teaches the room to stop pretending it was ever dark. She smiled, folded the note back, and placed it in her drawer. Then she turned off the lights and left the office door open behind her. A janitor walked the empty halls that night. Not Ethan, just another unseen worker. He paused by the whiteboard in the strategy room where someone had written, in small red letters, "Check your loss function. It's backwards." He didn't understand what it meant, but he smiled anyway. Because even without knowing, he could feel that something in this building was finally facing the right direction.